Welcome to Small Arms Solutions. Today we're looking at the G36 Bundeswehr rifle. Now this rifle's history goes back to the mid-70s. West Germany was equipped with the G3 rifle, which was basically a enhanced version of the World War II rifles that were used by the Nazis. As you can see from the look of it, you have a lot of look here of the Sturmgewehr, but you also have the later HK G45 roller-delayed blowback system. Now, West Germany throughout the 70s and 80s was looking to replace the 7.62 by 51 millimeter rifle. Now, throughout that time period, there were several things that were looked at. Now, first we had the G11. The G11 was submitted to the Advanced Combat Rifle program, which was a 4.73 caseless cartridge. A very, very expensive rifle, very, very experimental. That one was looked at in Germany as a replacement rifle as well. However, due to budget constraints, and not to mention at that time we had the reunification of Germany, that program was canceled. The next rifle that was looked at was the HK33. The HK33 was basically what you see here, but a 5.56 millimeter version. The HK33 was selective fire 5.56 millimeter. It didn't really offer a lot of the benefits of the newer 5.56 millimeter rifles, so that one was overlooked as well. Another version that was looked at was the HK41, which was the semi-automatic only version of the G3, which also was not what they were looking for. With the reunification of Germany, they were looking to re-equip for an entire German military. So the Germans wanted to look for a modern rifle that was NATO compatible. So HK produced the HK50. The HK50 was destined to become the G36. The rifle that we see here is, for all intents and purposes, a Bundeswehr G36, however, it's made in the U.S. by Tommy Built. For the most part, there's not much telling difference. It's basically the exact same rifle, so we're going to be using this as a quintessential G36. The new G36 production began in 1996 for the Bundeswehr for the G36. Now, the G36 has a lot of similarities to the M4 carbine. Basically, you had a standard rifle that was designed to be as lightweight as possible. And as we're going to learn a little bit later in this video, the G36 and the M4 are going to end up having some of the same issues in Afghanistan. But taking a look at the rifle, we're going to go over some different things about this rifle, and we're going to see how it works, and we're going to go over a little bit of the history of where the design comes from. Now, this rifle makes extensive use of polymer. Extensive use of polymer. You have actually very little metal on this rifle. You have the barrel of trunnion, obviously the bolt carrier group. But what we're looking at here is a polymer receiver. The particular sight that we have on here can be changed out. The sight that we have on here is specific to the Bundeswehr. We have a side folding stock that, when closed, the ejection port is open, so you're able to fire with the stock closed. We have a trigger pack that is very similar to that of the HK MP5. This one here is safe, semi, and auto. However, this is a commercial rifle, so the automatic does not work. It's just safe and semi. However, the Bundeswehr had safe, semi, and auto. And just like any other HK type rifle, you can have safe, semi, burst, 2-shot, 3-shot, whichever configuration that you would like. You do have a polymer trigger. Now, the magazine well you see here is interchangeable. We're going to go over the magazines here in a second, but they use a proprietary magazine. There's also a adapter available for this, so you can use a Stenag magazine. You do have a fire cartridge case deflector. Now, on the bottom here, you do have a bolt catch. By pushing upward on the bolt catch, you're able to lock the bolt to the rear. Now, the charging handle is on the top. You have either left or right. It is reciprocating, so it does go back and forth when the rifle fires. Now, it also doubles as a forward assist. When you push it out to the side and push it in, it does react as a forward assist as well. Looking at the side, we have an ambidextrous safety, we have an ambidextrous magazine release, and an ambidextrous bolt release and bolt catch. Now, looking at the magazine, we have a coupling system. As you can see, we have tabs on each side. Now, you can literally do these as much as you would want. You could have 3, 4, 5, or you could have 10 of these magazines if you wanted. However, 2 or 3 is more common. 30-shot magazines. There's also available 20-shot magazines for these as well. These magazines are relatively flimsy compared to anything else HK has put out. I've actually broken a couple of these. I use the same magazine in my CZ Bren 805. Now, magazines are available from other companies as well. Magpul. Magpul has offered a polymer magazine for the G36, which is definitely an improvement over the HK magazines. Now, this is an 18.5-inch barrel, which we'll go over. We also have a bayonet lug on here and a standard flash suppressor. The operation is short stroke piston, suckering about 750 rounds per minute. The overall length extended, with the stock extended, is 39.3 inches with 29.8 inches closed. Now the barrel is an 18.9 inch cold hammer forged barrel. It's a 1 turn and 7 twist for the NATO cartridge. It is also chrome plated, so you're sort of getting the best of both worlds, the cold hammer forge as well as the chrome plating. However, you do have a very thin barrel, which we'll see when we get this thing apart. This rifle was designed to be lightweight first and foremost. Now, HK refers to this as a carbon-reinforced polymer, very durable polymer, which again, it makes up most of the rifle. And then what we're going to start doing now is we're going to show you how this thing comes apart. We're going to take a look at the inside. Now, to take this rifle apart, you do not need any tools. This is a complete toolless disassembly. So we're going to make sure we're empty. And I know HK makes use of the same types of pins they have on their G3 systems on the G36. So to remove the handguard, we push forward on the pin, pull the pin right out, and on the stock is provided the same holders for the pins so the pins aren't lost. Now we can pull the handguard right off the front, exposing the gas system. Next, we're going to remove the magazine well and the fire control group by pushing forward. We remove the rear pin. We have a pin to remove the magazine well. So we have the fire control group. This is an assembly so you can place any system that you want, safe semi-auto, safe semi-burst, safe semi-2-shot burst, 3-shot burst, whichever you require. To remove the magazine well, you push forward on the magazine latch. Comes right out. As previously stated, there is a separate magazine well that can be installed so it will take Stenag magazines. To remove the stock, we close the stock. We're going to pull down and pull back, and we're going to remove the recoil spring assembly and the bolt carrier group. So now we're going to take a look at some other interesting aspects of this rifle, where it comes from, because this is not what you refer to as a new design. So to remove the gas system, we're going to pull back on the operating rod assembly, and we're going to pull that right out. And we have the piston. And that's as far as we're going to go on the receiver. Next thing we're going to take a look at is the bolt carrier group. We're going to remove the recoil spring assembly. Now for disassembly, you could utilize a bullet tip or any kind of a tool. You remove the firing pin retaining pin, the firing pin, and we have a makeshift cam pin, and you remove the bolt. And now you have the bolt carrier group. Now we're going to go over some of the history of where this system comes from. This is a direct derivative of an American design, the American AR-18, AR-180. Now this rifle here, we have a separate video on it. It's called the most successful failure of the last century, which is very, very true. The rifle never made any headway itself. However, its design would be seen in some of the most modern rifles that we have today. G36, the XM8, the Tavor, the FN Scar, they would all go true to its operating system. So we're going to take a look at this real quick, and we're going to show you exactly where this bolt mechanism and this operating system come from. First part we're going to take a quick look at is the bolt mechanism. You can see a nearly identical carrier, and you can see a nearly identical bolt. This is where it's going to even get more interesting. We're going to disassemble the bolt in the exact same way. Push outward. And the retaining pin. Remove the firing pin. The same kind of cam pin. And now we're going to take a look at the bolts. Bolts have a very, very big similarity too, don't they? Now we're going to take the bolt from the AR-180 and we're going to drop that into the bolt carrier of the G36. That sucker fits. That shows you have basically an indirect copy of the AR-180, AR-18 bolt carrier group. When we look at the carrier, we can see we have the same location for the hole. Difference is we use dual recoil springs in the AR-18, AR-180 versus one spring On the G36, again, we can see dual holes and for the bolt on the rear. And when you look at the bolt carriers, if you take a look at the original video we showed you on the AR-18, AR-180, you're going to see a direct descendants. You're going to see bolt carriers of several different rifles that show the lineage of the AR-18, AR-180. Now, looking at the operating systems, you'll see we have very, very similar systems here. Things are rearranged a little bit, but we have on top the AR-18, AR-180, operating rod, spring, and instead of having a two-piece system where you have an intermediate rod on the AR-180, you have a single. So basically you have, HK has done some modifications to the piston itself. They're utilizing gas rings, which require less gas. But however, you have a system that's very, very similar. So when you look at the overall operating system, for as far as the bolt carrier group, as well as the operating system, you see a heavy resemblance to the American Armalite AR-180. So what we're going to do now is we're going to reassemble the G36. So we're going to install the bolt into the bolt carrier, extractor to the right, install the cam pin, a little bit harder to do when you have really big hands. Install the retaining pin from the left-hand side. Now, looking at the barrel here assembly, you can see we have a very thin pencil-type barrel. We have a bayonet lug which is pinned in place. You have your gas block, which is also pinned in place with a spring pin. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to install the piston into the gas block. We're going to install the operating rod into the receiver. So now we have our operating rod in place. Take our handguard. Take one of our pins. Then we're going to take our bolt carrier assembly. Make sure the bolt's in the unlock position. Flip it over. We're going to install our magazine well. Again, pushing forward on the magazine well. Now, take our pistol grip assembly, install it in place. Take our pins. Take our front pin. We're going to install our recoil spring assembly. And you can see we have a tip on here. So underneath like so. Take our last pin, insert it into the side, and do a function check. Put it in safe. Nothing should happen. Semi. You can tell it click. Ready to go. Next thing we're going to take a look at is the optic. The optic we have here on here is a standard Zeiss. It's a 3 to 4 power dual optic sight. We have dual optics. On top, we have a red dot. And on the bottom, we have a 3-power magnified sight. Now, with the magnified optic sight, we combined as a 3-power magnifier sight designed for 200 meters, but will have bullet drop compensation from 200 to 400, 600, and 800 meters. For the red dot optic we have on here, we have a lever where it can be activated by the user on and off. And on top here, we have a photo sensor which indicates ambient light, and it will also turn it on automatically. With the onset of the global war on terror, the Bundeswehr had assumed operations in Afghanistan with other UN forces. And the rifle was developed in the calm of no war. The rifle was utilized during peacetime, some peacekeeping operations, but never saw any kind of heavy combat. However, that was to change once the Bundeswehr entered Afghanistan. In April 2012, reports came in from Afghanistan from the Bundeswehr of G36 rifles that were overheating, and it was effectively making the rifle inaccurate at 100 meters. And it was basically called the rifle was unsuitable for battle conditions. In February 2014, it was discovered that the issue was not necessarily the rifle, it was the ammunition. The rifle was, in fact, heavily overheating, which would cause failures to extract, but the accuracy issues were mostly because of the ammunition. The ammunition that was used on the German 5.56 NATO, the jacket was extremely thin, so the bullet was disintegrating once the barrel heated up at 100 yards. If the bullet held together, you were able to hit a bunch beyond that, the bullet would come apart. However, that was one issue, but the other issue came with the overheating. In June of 2014, production of the G36 was halted by the German Ministry of Defense. In direct quote from the German Ministry of Defense, the German Army will stop using the plastic assault rifle that cannot shoot past when temperatures increase to 86 degrees Fahrenheit on rifles that heat up during a firefight. Now, this is where there's a parallel between the G36 and the M4. The detriment of this rifle, according to the Bundeswehr, was its lightweight, utilizing a lightweight barrel. The M4 was also receiving many reports of it overheating in combat. Now, both of these rifles were designed for extreme lightweight. They weren't designed for heavy fire schedules. And the M4 would end up having some changes that were made for it to make it into an assault rifle. The M4, as it was developed and as it was issued, was not to be a frontline combat weapon. It was to be used by rear echelon personnel who needed more firepower than a pistol but couldn't carry a full-size rifle. It was not designed to be used in heavy combat, but it was thrusted into that position. G36 was designed for a standard rifle, not for sustained fire. What it was found with both rifle systems is both of them were being used beyond their capabilities. They were being used for sustained fire, which, when you go with a lightweight, light barrel, they're not good for that. The M4 corrected it by going with the heavy barrel, the M4 SOCOM heavy barrel, and that took care of the issues of making it so it would function in a sustained capacity. G36, those changes were never made to it. But the Bundeswehr, Ministry of Defense, decided they were going to go after HK in a lawsuit, saying that these rifles were defective, and they wanted to go after them for the money that it would cost to replace it. However, the German courts found that HK was not responsible because the rifles were being used beyond their design parameters. And if so, these were not meeting any requirements. The requirements were not clearly stated by the government to H&K. So H&K never did have to pay for any of the issues that went along with the G36. However, the rifle was no longer being produced. Now the German military was off to look for a new rifle. So currently, as of this time, the German military is looking at two different weapon systems to replace the G36. First off was the HK 433. Now, the original HK 416, which the government was looking at, was just too expensive. There was absolutely no way the German government was going to pay for the HK 416. So HK went ahead and designed a new rifle that was less expensive for specifically the German Bundeswehr trials, which is the HK 433. And the next rifle that is up and running right now is the Hanel Mark 5.56, which has a lot of similarities to the HK 416. So right now there is not a defined winner yet throughout the Bundeswehr. So we're still waiting to see what the German army decides to go with. Now this rifle, as a standard combat rifle, did quite well when you weren't trying to make it run like a belt-fed machine gun. However, I can give you some examples of my experience, but I think first what we're going to do is we're going to take this one to the range and we're going to see how it shoots. I only fired about 500 rounds out of this rifle. One of the viewers from 9-Hole Review loaned it to Henry over at 9-Hole Review for review, and he loaned it to me as well. I have to say that it was reliable. In all 500 rounds, we had no issues whatsoever with reliability. Now, the best group that I was able to get was with Black Hill 77 grain OTM, which is the best ammunition you can probably get in the industry, and that group was 2.26 inches. So when you compare this to your standard M4 or M16 type rifle, this was not nearly as accurate as a standard M4. Also, the trigger, having a lot of polymer components in it, the trigger was horrible. It's very similar to the Beretta ARX 100, where you have a very heavy trigger because of the heavy use of the polymers. Now, for as far as the sights were concerned, I will say I did not care for the German Bundeswehr sights whatsoever. First off, if you look at the top, the red dot, you have a very, very small aperture on here, and you have a bluish tint to it. And that bluish tint, I don't care for. I've seen several other optics over the years, in the early years of development of red dots, that had that similar issue. I find it very distracting, and it does hide out some of the brightness of the dot that's in there. Now, for as far as the magnified optic. The magnified optic, due to the fact that the aperture is so small, I found it very, very narrow. I found a very narrow field of vision. I did not care for that. And with it being only 3 power, it didn't really give you a great benefit, I think, for as far as longer range shooting. You look at the non-magnified optic, which is supposed to be used up to 100 meters. Then 100 meters and above, you would use the magnified optic. However, I found that it didn't work for me whatsoever. Quite frankly, if I was to have this rifle, I probably would remove this whole system and put on either a regular, like a ACOG type scope, or EOTech or something along those lines with a 4-power magnifier where I could disengage it and engage it. This system, you can see they wanted to try to go both ways. It really, really didn't work for as far as I was concerned. I don't care for it, but they've issued many of these, and the Germans, they like it. So I guess sometimes it's up to opinion of what you like and what you don't like, and what works for you and what doesn't work. And we're going to be doing another review on a rifle similar to this that's built by Tommy Built. Now, the G36 was never brought into the country for commercial sales. They did have an SL8, which was a commercial version, which was it was horrible. The SL8 looked nothing like the regular G36. It proved to be a very poor seller, and it was just never very popular. However, Tommy Built, they were able to take those rifles, those SL8s, which had the basic G36 components, and build American-made components to turn it into what you see here, which is a G36 type rifle. Now, Tommy Built, we're just going to go over them a little bit right now because we're going to be doing a whole video on those guys later on down the road. But they manufacture the receivers. The receivers you can buy for $849 to build the rifle. They manufacture most all the components on here. They can either do basically a complete American-built version, or they can do a conversion from the SL8 parts to the G36. They also offer a version of the XM8 as well. That includes the stock assemblies, the pistol grip, and some of the internal components of the bolt carrier group. For as far as the quality difference between the two, this one compared to the standard G36 that I've shot in the past, which were German military ones, I don't see much of a difference at all myself. Of course, the German ones that I had shot in the Middle East in the past were all selective fire. This one was semi-automatic only. But for as far as the fit, finish, the feel, they felt about the same. The trigger is just as horrible on this one as it was on the German ones. So this is a really good rendition of it. Now, Tommy Built offers quite a few versions of this rifle. They offer various barrels. They offer 9.4, 13-inch, 16.5-inch barrels. They offer tanker models. They offer pistols. They offer K models. They have a very big variation of what they offer in these rifles. This particular one was built specifically to be a complete copy of the German Bundeswehr rifle, right down to the optic. The optic itself is extremely expensive to have on this, just for authenticity, but it's a very interesting rifle. Now, here in the States, this is very much a unicorn. We just don't see them, and quite frankly, just because of the cost, you're never going to see them. For those of who do want to invest in the money to have their very own G36, Tommy Built is pretty much your only option, and he does a wonderful job. But the G36 has been another one of those failures throughout the years. And sometimes when guns fail, they're not due to the gun themselves. It's due to miscommunications between the military and the manufacturers of what the gun is supposed to do. This rifle performs the role of a combat rifle just fine. But once you take a rifle that's designed to be this light and you try to put it into a role where it's being used as a light support weapon, it will overheat. It will have failures to extract when it gets hot. You do have the issues with ambient temperature before it even fires, especially in Iraq where you have 100, 120 degrees, ambient temperature in sunlight where everything heats up. So there are consequences to having lightweight weapons. Sometimes that can be a detriment to it. And the biggest benefit of this rifle was its biggest weakness, as was with the M4. The M4 was everybody loved it because it was lightweight, but it was not designed to perform the role of a light support weapon. And if this was the case with both governments, the U.S. government and the German government, they should have let HK know in this case, and the government should let Colt know that we're going to use this as a fully automatic weapon, and we're going to have it for heavy support, light support weapon status, which the U.S. government would have put the heavy barrel on like they're doing now, since we've had all the issues in Afghanistan and Iraq with the M4. And the Germans would have done the same thing with this rifle. They would have gotten rid of this lightweight barrel and put on a heavier barrel. But the heavier use of polymer with the G36 was also an option. It was an issue. There had been videos where it's shown destruction testing on these rifles where the polymer caught on fire. So, it's very difficult to bridge that gap between lightweight and combat reliability and combat durability. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you do, please click like, please subscribe, and even better, share. Thank you.